Okay, moving on to a little bit more difficult video or more difficult part. We are going to be completing these to-dos related to button all in one video, partially together. So let's start off right away with part 1. And so with part 1, we want to create a button, we want to initialize color and element values. Now, I want to just take you through what is a button class and what does it represent. A button class here keeps track of the button color based on the press. It also, however, keeps track of making sure that upon a button press, it changes to a new color, and it removes, for example, like the back shadow. You remember how we press the key, it creates this really nice glow, right? Well, that's what it keeps track of. And so the first thing, if you think of a button, right, what does it contain? This button here contains, obviously, the letter, right? But it also contains the most important part, which contains the color, the border color, and it also will contain in the future the box shadow, because when we click A or B or S, you want it to go ahead and we want to have it kind of highlight and be very showy, I guess you can say. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to save or create a color within this button. We're going to save a color with this button. Now you might be thinking to yourself, where are we actually initializing this? Great, we have a class, but what about an object? Well, let's go back to script.js. Here's something you didn't know. We're actually going to assign this key code to a button object as well, because we already have a beat for it. Why not also have it have a button object? So in this case, we're going to create a button, and we're going to say new button, and we're going to pass in two things. We're going to pass in the color, and then we're going to pass in the key code. Now remember, the color is the color of the border, so it's the color that represents the button. Currently, the default color is this, we like to say agua color, but the color for this one specifically is this color. So the first three have this color. We're going to pass in this as a string, and then we're going to pass in right away a key code, which is 65 in this case. Okay, perfect. And this is how the button class gets initialized. But right now, there's really nothing inside the button. So let's go back to here. And so what I want you to do in here, I want you to go ahead and I want you to initialize this button. So I want you to complete this constructor class, initialize the button with color and key code, but I also want you to initialize it with an element. Remember, inside the index.html file, remember how we had these IDs and I said I will explain it to you later. Well, these IDs, my friends, represent to the key code. See 65? A? Well, 65. 65. They all come together. So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and grab the element, whichever way you would like, and to save it as a this.element inside the button class right here. So go ahead and do that, try it out for yourself, and then come back and we'll do it together. So let's see how we do this together. When we passing in the color and the key code, let's first save the color. So we're gonna say this.color equals color. That's all we need to do. Now, we can also say this.key code. Why not? We can say this.key code equals key code, no problem. But we also want to save the element. So we do this.element equals document.get element by ID. And in this case, the ID is based on the key code right there, just like that. And we want to go ahead and console log the element. Oh, we have element is not divided. I'm sorry, console log this.element right there. So we have console log this.element, and let me remove the console log here for this.audio. We don't need this anymore. We know this works. And so we see that there's only one element. This is div ID 65 class button A, and that's the element. And the reason why there's only one is because we're only initializing it once. We're not doing it for any other ones. And so you're starting to see again the big picture of how we're actually going to utilize these beats to control buttons and so forth. So with that in mind, we can now mark this to do done. On part 2, we want to go ahead and we want to set button color, upon initialization, and initialize button in beats 65. So in this one. Now, yes, we have already done this. We've already initialized it in beat 65, but we have not initialized the button color. Now, what does the button color mean? This button color right here is a default button color. It doesn't really mean anything. we want to actually set it from JavaScript. So if we go to utils.js, you see, we have the set button color in HTML. So your goal, we're actually going to go ahead and we're going to call this function here. So we're going to say this dot set button color in HTML. And it's going to be up to you now to use document.element.id and a few attributes to set the border color, for this button using this color right here. So go ahead and try it out inside here, this function, and then come back and we'll do it together. Okay, let's see how we get this working. To set the color, it's really simple, honestly. We already have the element, which is here. This element is already gotten. We don't need to document.element.id. We do this dot element dot style dot border color equals this dot color. And that, my friends, that is it. That's all we need to do. And now, for example, if we go back, right? So obviously nothing changes because this color actually is the aqua color. But if I change it to, for example, white. Now it's white, you see? Let me change it back to its original one. Oop, now it's this one. So now we have a button that sets the color for that specific button. And we can mark this to do done. Nice job. Up next, part 3 is complete select function to set the color and shadow of button upon pressing. Now, what does this mean? This means that if we go to our solution, you see how when we press A, it changes. This background color changes, and also we add a shadow. And so we want to make sure we do that upon the pressing of a button. And that really happens inside one function. It happens inside this select function. The select function sets the background color and box shadow from this dot color. Then I added a small hint. And this hint right here says a box shadow looks like this. It looks like this is 0 pixels. So this is actually, I don't want to get into this technically, but this is horizontal change, vertical change. It's blur, it's spread, and then the color. And really, it's going to look like this because I just want to give you the formula. We're not focusing so much on the CSS portion of it, but pay more attention to the color. Remember, this color is not really just FFFFF. This is the white color. Our color is this dot color. So be careful here. And so go ahead and try out to set the element background color and the box shadow to the appropriate attributes. Go ahead and try it out, and then we'll come back and do this together. All right, let's do it together. Setting the background color and box shadow looks like this. Now, we have this element. Again, we don't need to do document.getElementById because we already have the element. So we do this, the element, dot style, dot background color equals, what do you think this equals? Well, it equals this dot color. So we're going to say this dot color. Perfect. So we covered that part. What about the box shadow? Well, the box shadow looks like this. This dot element dot style dot box shadow equals, what is it equal to? We're actually going to use template literals. So we're going to say here, and we're going to replace this FFF with this dot color, like so. And that, my friends, will now set the color for the specific button. And we can even test it out. So if I do, for example, let's say I go ahead and we do this dot select, just so we can see it for our purpose. This one right here, by the way, highlights, because again, this is the only one that's working, right? Let's remove this for now, because we're going to be calling this function later on, not specifically right now. Let's remove this, and we can go ahead right away and mark this to do done. Move on to the next one. We have call the select function upon key press. Let's see what that happens. If we look down, where do we think we would call it? Well, we call the play inside here. Do you think maybe we should do that here too? I think so too. So your exercise right now is to go ahead and call the select function for the button call the select function in the button, and then have it, and then you will see it right away select. So go ahead and try it out, and then come back and we'll do it together. Okay, let's do it together. We can say here right away, we can do key press dot button dot select right there. Now, let's test how this works. Remember, it will only work for this button right now. If you call for anything else, we're probably going to get an error. So I'm gonna say A. We got the music and we got the color. Perfect. If we true A, S, yeah, cannot read property if select of undefined, because remember, this button is undefined for this specific object right here. Okay? Moving on forward. Now we can mark this to do done, because that's working. Don't worry the fact that it's not removing the class, that's completely fine. Now part 5 is add transition for button selection. Okay, now where do we look into that? The transition in the button selection is inside the styles of CSS. Now I know we have not really touched styles in this course, but it's going to be a good practice for you to start to get into. Now a transition, if we look at, I'm going to do this with you guys, this one. Transition, CSS transition. Looks like this. So we have a transition. CSS transitions allow you to change property values very smoothly. So, you know, it transitions very nicely. And you have a few properties. You have a transition property, transition delay, transition duration property, and timing function. Now you can all put this into one call, which looks just kind of like this. You see transition with 2 seconds. So this means that the transition here, if I zoom in here, the transition here is for the width and in 2 seconds, meaning if the width changes, it makes sure that it changes nicely and smoothly. So in our case, we want to what? We want to transition the background color and we want to transition the shadow. Very easily put, we can do it in one take. We have this here CSS class button, and so we're accessing the button here. We can put a transition here that looks like this. Transition. We can say all, so all attributes of this button, and we can say, for example, 0.3 seconds. And let's see how that changes things. Let's go back to here. I'm gonna close this out. Let's go back to here. Oh, let's go back to script.js. Let's see. You see, now it's a very nice transition that doesn't happen so like sporadically. It's in your face. It's just whoop, and that's it. Let's try it out again. You see? Very nice. So we can probably even mark this less. We could probably do 0.2 seconds to make this faster. Let's try this again. Oh, I like that. I like that. That's quick. That was very quick. I like that. Transitions, we'll get into transitions more as we get into projects. But trust me, they're very nice and people love them. I know it. Trust me. And so now we can mark this to do, my friends. Done as well. Perfect. Part 6, and we're almost there, is when you want to remove the button style upon transition end. Use the select function. This might be a little bit of a difficult one, but I'm going to take you through it. Let's go to utils.js. Now, before we actually do that, the reason why we want to remove transition or remove the style is because we want to press and then go back to its original state. So it's a press, right? Because right now it just stays at this state. So let's go back to utils.js. This select function adds the box shadow and background color. Now we want some kind of a function to remove that background color and box shadow. But how do we do this? Now, yes, right here, we can remove the background color and box shadow with the select function. So the first things first I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and reset the background color and box shadow within the select function. So try it out for yourself and then come back and we'll do it together. Okay, let's do this. We're gonna do this.element.style. Same thing, background color equals, we're gonna say in this case none. So no background color. For box shadow, we're gonna say this.element. I'm sorry, not none. This is transparent. This is the right one to say. Transparent, right? And then this.element.style dot box shadow, and that equals to, now that equals to none. So you have to look into the default values of these properties. So the default value for background color is transparent, and we want to take it back to its default value. And the default value for box shadow is none, and so we want to take it back to its original value. So obviously now the question becomes, where do we call this select function? Well, that's an interesting part. Really, when we press A, nothing really changes. We still get this glow, and it still stays at that point. So let's think about it for a second, and I want you to think about this. When do you think, and you know, think of it obviously, or I mean, if you could tell it to me over through a screen, that'd be great. But when do you think is going to be a good time for us to remove this shadow and this background color when you press a key? And I'm gonna type this out here. Solution 1 is to go ahead and remove style on key up. So basically, you press down, key down. As you release the key, it removes the style. Solution 2 is we can go ahead and we wait a certain amount of time. So wait a certain amount of time to remove style. So after 0.2 seconds or something. However, there's another solution that might be a little bit better, and that's the one we're going to use. Solution number 3. There's an event that's called transition end. Basically, when the transition finishes, it triggers an event called transition end, and then we can remove the style once it ends. And that, my friends, is how we're going to do it better. Because this way, we're not relying on time. We're not relying on the key up. We're simply relying on the transition when it becomes a color, an active color. Now we remove it. And that's going to be the better way to do it. So this solution 3 is going to be react on transition end event. So I'm going to create a function with you. So do this together with me. Set a transition end listener equals that, just like so. We're gonna call this function right away when it's created. So we're gonna say this dot set listener, and that's when we're going to call it right away at the beginning. And how are we going to add event listener? Well, we have the element, so we do this dot element dot add event listener, and it has a transition end, and that has a function now. Like so. Let's see what happens and when it gets triggered. So we're gonna say console.log transition ended for this specific button. So yeah, transition ended in here, that's fine. But let's say if I do A, there we go, see? Now the reason why you have multiple, so I'm gonna clear this out for now. I'm gonna remove this. The reason why you have multiple ones is because there's multiple transitions. You have the box shadow, you have the border color, and all of that, and then the background color. So if I do this again, we have 2 fired, right? Remember, the box shadow transition, and then we have the background color that transitions, and that's why we have 2 things that fine. And that's completely fine. That's not a problem whatsoever. All we want to do is, no matter if the transition ended for both of them, for any of them, we want to deselect the button. So we say this dot deselect, and this deselect will then go ahead and remove the box shadow and the background color. So let's try this out. Press it. Oops. Whoop. No. Boom. See? By the way, it removes it. If we, for example, if I go ahead, if I change the transition to, let's say, 5 seconds. 5 seconds. It's gonna wait for that as well. Let's try it. 5 seconds, and then it removes it slowly. Now that, my friends, is how we go ahead and we wait and we remove that transition very nicely. Obviously 5 seconds is no bueno, so we say 0.2 seconds, and that is it. And now we go back to util.js, and now, my friends, we go ahead and we very nicely have connected the background color, the border color, the transitioning, and the key press to a button. And now we can mark this to do done. Nice job. We're almost there.